Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining Annie and me. It is such a pleasure for me to interview Annie on her new book, which is Dusk Night Dawn. It is stunning. It's beautiful. It's on revival and courage. And I've read it twice, and I have to say, it's a pleasure for me to be in the interviewer seat, which I love. And so, hello, sweetheart.
Hello, honey. Thank you for you're great to do this.
Oh, no, it is such a pleasure. And so, my first question is I think I love this question when someone asks me this. What inspired this beautiful book? Out of by the way, of all the beautiful books you've written, this is what, number 10?
Well, it's my 19th book. Yeah.
Your 19th, and a New York Times bestseller, I might add. So, what inspired?
Well, my last book was called Almost Everything Thoughts on Hope, which I had originally wanted to call Doomed Thoughts on Hope because the world had gotten so weird and grim politically and environmentally. But my publisher said, no, I couldn't do that. So I went on a book tour for the book on hope, and everywhere I went, people felt hopeless. They felt this existential exhaustion. Mm-hmm. They felt overwhelmed by what was going on in their families and in their nation, and they felt clueless as to where to even begin the restoration. And so I sat down to write about what I thought might be useful stories I could tell that I thought would give some inspiration or even direction. So can I just read the first page? Okay, this will. Okay. Here we are, older, scared, numb on some days and enraged on others, with even less trust than we had a year ago. The devastating pandemic and the federal government's confused and deadly response was simply the final straw to a few years of crushing developments. A UN report on climate catastrophe was published months before my wedding in 2019. The report of the extinction of 1 million species just 3 weeks after. Major buzzkill. Our poor country has been torn asunder. I await the reign of frogs. And I've gotten so much less young. I got Medicare 3 days before I got hitched, which sounds like something an old person might do, which does not describe adorably ageless me. I mostly love being in the third of my life, as it is the easiest that life has ever been, except for, well, the bodily aspects and the dither and fogginess. And I wouldn't go back a year. Well, maybe back 2 years before the 2 UN reports, which have changed everything. At our wedding, we were all the people we love most in the world, gathered in a redwood grove to celebrate the miracle that Neil and I had found each other and fallen in love and toughed out some conflicts. We celebrated and overate, of course, while outside the sacred circle, our nation and the world seemed to have reached the point of no return. So we danced. That was glorious, and I hate to be a downer, but now what? Where on earth do we start to get our world and joy and hope and our faith in life itself back?
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
But in part of that journey, when you're answering that question, which is an ongoing theme in your book, takes the reader into the soul again and again and again and again. You are always weaving into the soul in this book and always describing it yet again, yet again, yet again in so many delicious ways. And I want to talk about that because I think the comments you make in the book and the way you weave back into the soul again and again in this kind of organic divinity, the way You see the soul present at every dance, at every wonder, when you're sitting on the seashore, when you're at the airport, no matter where it is, your soul's walking next to you like a companion, like handing you a pair of glasses and saying, look at something this way. So I'm going to read something.
Okay.
My turn.
Yes.
I love this. The soul is the lighthouse from which we see the vast celestial ocean, a kiosk from which we observe whatever passes by, the purest expression of our being alive, the one part they couldn't wreck in the paranoid sense of the word they. Charles Bukowski said, if you don't have much soul left and you know it, you've still got soul. Plato said his soul is immortal and imperishable. My new husband, who still reads Plato, if you can believe it, is prone to the random Obi-Wan pronouncement. And he says that the soul is made of friendly awareness and the awareness of that awareness. Mm. I love the precision with which you describe the soul. It tells me again and again when I read your work that you know what you're talking about.
Well, it takes me 5 drafts to get it as precise as you think it is. So that passage, which is probably, say, 200 or 300 words, could have been a day's work of taking out all the stuff that, some of the stuff that I just thought was so erudite or brilliant, I took out, and I took out some of the stuff that tried to be more comical so that people won't think I'm a depressive. And I just keep working it until finally it's like a Polaroid, like the first image appears and I could see the kiosk, I could see the lighthouse. Adyashanti, who I love, said, the part of you that sees you're afraid is not afraid, and everybody that I love, that I've read, including you, goes to that understanding that we are that the truest part of us is not what people see or who we pretend to be or who we even think we are, but that it's the inside Russian nesting doll, that you keep opening up another identity or persona that you aren't, but that you've been pretending to be or agreeing to be all these years. And then finally there's this little being, like in that chapter, my Sunday school kids, there were 3 of them that day. One of them said, she thought that she was young. She was, I forgot, 7 or 8. She said she thought the soul was a little kitty rabbit Pikachu creature in your very heart. And if you know who Pikachu is, it's like, so it is loving awareness. And then the boy, who was about 15 and kind of cranky, said he thought it was a silvery snow globe in the center of you, And so the kids, I wrote down everything they said, because it kept helping me get closer and closer. And, just with writing, I know this is true for you too. You keep figuring out what it isn't that you're doing, and then you get closer and closer to what you were sort of aiming for all along. And I just wanted a really clean description of our truest, deepest inside person looking out with probably wonder and a kind of touched by it all, instead of with opinions or judgment or blame, just with wonder.
Okay, so here's a question.
Okay.
Why do you think it's important it's like part of your charism, part of what you are meant to be doing is to navigate the waters of the soul and to describe that. And so why is it important for people to have a new navigator of the soul, to describe the content of the soul in contemporary language? Why do people need that so much now?
Well, everywhere I go, when I'm talking in public, which I haven't done for a year, and everywhere I go in my little community, in my own little galaxy here, people just feel a lot of overwhelm. I mean, there's a constant stream of data and endless shifting and like plays of light and just kind of pandemonium in the visible level. and on our screens, on our TV, the entire telecommunications empire, which we often have going all at once. And so I think it's really important to say, that's all really great conversationally, but you seem to be feeling really exhausted and kind of flattened by it all. And I'm wondering if we might just sit here a minute and breathe our way into something, a place in us that might be fully alive and not defeated and not depressed. And just like Neil, my husband, his work at Shapes of Truth is constantly about, that's the name of his book, which I thought of, by the way. Okay, shapesofTruth.com. But anyway, it's always about getting back to curiosity, and people that I'm close to and people that I speak to, you've lost a lot of those child aspects, Jesus saying you must become a child to get into the kingdom of heaven, which is a sweet, gentle heart and a more spacious awareness of life. It's not about what's on the TV set tonight. It's not about the Oprah interview or MSNBC. It's about this deeper, pure, truer thing. There's a great phrase in the Hebrew Bible in one of the Psalms where the psalmist, probably David, in one of his states, says, he talks about deep calling to deep. So that I think we imagine the waterfall calling to the stars, say, but we also understand it from the mystical level or the level of soul to mean the deepest part of my heart, calling to the sky, calling to the birds, the calling to the galaxy, all one. And as soon as you are connected umbilically to something bigger than what's going on in your kind of rattle trap pinball machine mind, you're free. And you can breathe again, and you have lots of energy again, right? You're back in the saddle.
It's true.
Yeah, right.
I think it's been my observation that I think a lot of the suffering that I see people have is actually a spiritual crisis and not psychological. And I think it comes from having a disconnect from their soul, from their organic holiness, that they don't realize they're disconnected from. And that fear of being attached to your own goodness, literally to your own goodness, and to your own life force in the true sense of love force.
Right.
And that
truth of your spiritual identity instead of your persona in the world. And the person, like in the book, my friend Duncan says that when you meet him, you meet his bodyguard, Yes. And so we present our bodyguard, and we don't want to look like we're true and real and vulnerable, because when we were kids, that meant we were about to get hurt, either by a big brother or on the blacktop at school. And so the truth of our spiritual identity is not about how we look that day or how many people came to our reading or how we're doing financially or in any way at all. Even people that are very, very, very ill find, because, I think it's really important for people to understand that you don't need a terminal diagnosis to throw out all that false crap that has kept you flying so low for so long, barely skimming the treetops. But when people get really sick, they get serious. And they go, I'm not going to carry around that false persona anymore. And I'm not going to get together very often with my Uncle Dan, because whenever I do, he makes me really small and I can no longer afford that. And people start to do it if they're pushed to it. But you don't have to. You can decide that you're a person of soul and spirit now. Where do you start? Well, you push back your sleeves. You be always where your butt is, and you breathe. And that is our umbilical connection to both depth and expansion. But I agree with you completely that it's a total spiritual catastrophe that people are undergoing collectively now.
Well, I think, and I'd love your opinion on this, I think that people confuse soul with religion. And they think that it's somehow or other that the nature of the soul is associated with religion, when in fact the soul is this cosmic life force. Come back here.
I had to turn the heater off. I was overheating. I didn't want to sweat.
But the soul is this cosmic
Right.
force that has no religion. It
Right.
is this incredible power that
Right.
is transcendent. And I want to tie that to something that really made me pause in your book. And I need.
Can I just say quickly that my understanding is that soul is the exact opposite of religion.
Yes.
Like in the Venn diagram of religion and soul, if there's a little overlap, it's not very impressive.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. One of the points you made in your book, which I thought if you were here when I was reading it, I would have stopped right here and I want to dive into it, is when you were talking about what women fear in an audience lecture you were giving in San Diego, and that so many women felt that they'd squandered their lives. And that's the phrase you use, that they'd squandered their lives. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that there is such an institutionalized contempt for women that if it's not one thing they're falling short of, it's another. Either they haven't kept their weight down, or what do they have to show for themselves, or whatever that day's is on that day's menu item to make women feel that they just missed the boat. Whereas it's not even true. It's a way, like Neil, again, my husband, talks a lot about the superego, and that the superego is there. It's a parasite, and it kept you safe. It kept you alive when you were a child. You didn't run out in the street. You didn't get hit by a car. You didn't swim out past your ability to stay afloat. I call it in the book dread. I say dread was my governess growing up. And there's that voice inside of you that is just, unless you have an awakening, or awakening every few hours, from that trance, there's a voice that's telling you that you're falling short. You haven't gotten enough done. You raised those silly children, or you worked all your life, or you did both, or women feel terrible. I always say, oh, I forgot to go to the gym after I had the baby, and I probably get on, and I had a baby 31 years ago, but it's a joke because otherwise it would be another thing I feel bad about, that I forgot to go to the gym after I had a baby. And so the women in San Diego, who were for the most part, very accomplished women whose lives were relatively easy, had all of these different things that they could feel bad about on any given day. That they hadn't worn enough sunscreen, that they hadn't this, but that you've squandered your life, I think, is the way that you can make yourself feel worst about yourself, that you had this one precious life and you wasted. It's like something you wrote probably 25 years ago that I live by and I repeat constantly, is your idea that we get $100 of psychic money every day, right? We get $100 in our bank account, and you have freedom, you have free will. You can spend it however you want. You can go to the gym for an hour and a half, but you have to pay for that. That could be $21. So now you have $79 to spend for the rest of the day. You could get on the phone with a bunch of people who you feel like you have to call back today because somebody's bugged you to do it. And that's fine. You get to call them all back, be on the phone with them, which you hate and which is kind of toxic for you. However, that's going to be $24 more. So that's 24 off 79. And that's the squander, is doing things that you don't want to do, like to do, and you don't actually have to do, but somebody said you should do, or that super ego, or the governess named Dread said you really have to do because your mother would have. My mother had a really miserable life, but so to have a bad voice telling you that you've squandered it is, first of all, it's the lie machine. You probably didn't. I don't know anyone who squandered their life. I know lots of women who didn't work and who raised their kids, and the kids have been gone for 20 years now, and it would be easy for them to think that. But what they've done all day is to do the sacrament of putter, and they have been in close contact with people in their community who couldn't get out to the store themselves, and they've brought them things, and they've done sewing projects, and they've volunteered at the food pantry and at the soup kitchen, and they worshiped and they studied and they listened to music. Well, listening to music all your life is not squandering your life. It's doing one of the deepest processes we can do, which to do that one of the deepest dives we can go into inside of the outside surface stuff is to really listen to a piece of music for 20 minutes. So I think it's yet another thing a mean thing that women can tell themselves about, and they get very afraid when they believe it.
Well, and it struck me that what we have in our society, and hopefully maybe we're seeing the beginning of this false value break, is that we've been worshiping at the altar of the God of productivity. Mm-hmm. If we're not productive, and if the way prayers are answered is not in some kind of productive form, like, what should I do, God? Well, get this job, and it's got to be this. There's some kind of productive, visceral, physical proof that we have never somehow been able to value our lives unless there is a productive manifestation of it. Mm-hmm. And that we do not understand the values of the soul or the needs of the soul. And it's been my experience and honestly my whole career, this journey of learning that in fact the soul is the powerhouse. It's the battery that operates everything. It's not the mind. I mean, it's the soul that is mission control. Mm-hmm. And it is the soul that thrives. It thrives on love, and it thrives on perception, and it thrives on compassion, and and what I realize, and this is a real challenge for me to communicate as well as I realize it, and I'm actually thrilled about seeing this, but it's kind of like, how do I communicate that we are this intuitive enterprise, and that the higher sense of our intuitive system is all about our capacity to read others, not ourselves. Our lower intuitive system is about reading the world, our immediate world, for survival. But our upper, and what really unlocks this passage to get into this, is something you emphasize in your wonderful book, which is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before we go into that, which is my favorite topic, I think Earth is forgiveness school, but everything that I was taught, I was raised by left-wing intellectuals, and I was raised to do really, really well. I was 35 before I realized a B+ was a good grade. I had a baby, and I was barely making a C+, but when I was a child, if we brought home B+, they would say, the great palace lie was, well, we're not criticizing you. We're just wondering how much harder would it have been to get an A-. But the catch was, if you got D-, the question was there still time in the quarter to bring it up to a full A, right? So you really couldn't win for losing. And if you got on that tennis court, you'd already lost. If you agreed to get on that court, you'd already lost. Mm. But so what I finally realized with my parents, and I've written about this so much, is that the addiction was to this forward thrust, that it's like the ever ready bunny versus the kiosk or the battery pack or the lighthouse inside of us. There was the forward thrust that you stay one step ahead of the abyss, right? Because a failure or a whatever, losing a job or doing poorly in school or whatever. And that it turned out that everything that contributed to any spiritual awakening or insight or life I have came from being coached, having birth coaches, you've been one of them, to fall into the abyss, the dark night of the soul. And then, the American way is if you have screwed up and you haven't successfully done forward thrust and you do fall into the abyss, then you just go to IKEA and you get a really festive throw rug, to like lighten up the load so people won't think you're a depressive. But if you are willing to be in the abyss, I mean, it's pretty abysmal, the abyss. But in the abyss is God. And in the abyss is you without any of your fakery, your burnished surface, the stuff that pleases small crowds. So I've always been able to hold out for people the possibility that if they feel that they're in the abyss, hallelujah, thank God, because they've been running for 65 years or 23 or whatever it's been so far. And if you go by what the world says, you'll spend your whole life. It's like being greyhounds at the track chasing the mechanical bunnies, and when one greyhound catches the bunny, it's metal and it's fake fur. When we were coming up, we're about the same age. It was always get your act together. Well, you get your act together and then you have an act, right? Right? And you weren't born to have an act. You were born to be fully alive, to be present, to be curious, to be a child again, to be spontaneous, to make mistakes, to fall. So anyway, on to forgiveness, which is such a huge part of healing, of spiritual and psychological healing. Boy, I just, it's been really hard for me. I'm not a natural forgiver, and I have to forgive myself for not being a good forgiver, but I eventually forgive. I wrote a book called Grace, and then in parentheses, eventually. Yeah. Grace is spiritual WD-40 that really will untangle the knots and the clench, but it's not going to be tomorrow right after lunch necessarily. It's going to be eventually, though. And there will be forgiveness. There will be, whether or not you are alive for it or not, whether you're still on this side of eternity or not. But C.S. Lewis said something that helped me enormously in my 20s. He said, if you decide to become a person of forgiveness, which is the most beautiful, profound way to live and the way to actualization, he didn't say all that, but he said, if you want to become a person of forgiveness, maybe you don't start with a Gestapo. Maybe you start with your Uncle Dan, and you do the work. You find the people, you find the book, or you find the Denise Levertov poem where somebody gives you a little place to start, and you go, oh, for Pete's sake, I wonder. And then, in recovery, people, when I first got sober, people always said, you take the action and the insight will follow. You don't figure it out is not a good slogan, but I was raised by intellectuals, so it's my default place. I'm going to break the code. I'm going to figure out how to forgive my Uncle Dan. But what if I take the action that I know that if I want to have loving feelings today and right now, I do loving things. I take the loving action. I do the radical self-love. I get myself a lovely cup of tea or a Halloween-sized pack of M&Ms. I reach out to someone who I know no one else called that day because they're annoying. Jesus doesn't say to just love and serve everyone unless they're annoying or they don't share your political views. It's like get thirsty people water, feed kids. That's it. That's all you have to do. Get thirsty. Now you might be the thirsty person. And there's many kinds of water. Get thirsty people water and feed children, and we'll let it go at that. But so you take the action. You get in your car and you go to Safeway and you fill a couple bags with delicious canned goods and a can opener and some cereal, some junky fun cereal for the kids, and you go over to where all the service workers live and you anonymously drop off a ton of groceries, and that more than anything is going to make your heart soft. It's like the actions of love and generosity are like meat tenderizer on our heart, and once your heart is a little bit softer, you don't look at your Uncle Dan with so much judgment and contempt. You think, oh my God, what a schlub, what a sad sack,
But and at the same time, I think one of the greatest, absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. I also think I've seen and I've come to believe deeply that forgiveness is the first self-initiated mystical act that we do. And that it is because it doesn't make any sense.
No.
And our mind will say, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this, because our mind thinks we're the center of the universe. And it likes that position. It's comfortable there. And it really does think the world was created for us. And it loves that illusion. And it dwells in that illusion. And it thinks that all courts of law should work out in our favor. Mm-hmm. And it can't figure out why things work out in anybody else's favor, because doesn't it know this universe was created for us? And forgiveness is actually about our deciding, I'm going to withdraw my soul from that story. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be caught in that spectacle anymore.
That's a great line. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to write it down and then I'm going to steal it. Okay. I'm going to withdraw my soul from that story.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. But that is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm done participating in that story. I'm done. And I'm
going. So how do you stop? You become aware that you're doing it again and it hurts you. So you just stop doing it?
No, what I love to teach people is that that the universe is two things. It is incredibly impersonal. I mean, it's for me, God is law. It is just totally everything is law. Our body operates on law. I mean, at a certain age, we start menstruating, and at a certain age, we're going to stop. Our heart has mathematical law to it. I love when I learned Pythagoras, I realized that his version of numbers completely make the chakra system come alive. I mean, everything is law and order in this universe. That's the nature of God. So it's completely impersonal. We jump, we're going to fall off a cliff. And at the same time, it's totally intimate. Therein lies holy paradox. And the intimacy is prayer. So prayer is in a miracle is when the divine completely bends the laws for you. Mm-hmm. And makes what the ordinary mortal would say is impossible possible. Oh. In the words of Teresa of Avila, nothing's impossible. With God, all things are possible. So, and that's why Jesus would say, you just don't get what I'm doing here. If you understood the mystical laws, you would get that the force of the soul is malleable, and that the mystical laws are malleable, and they just work right through you when you are in alliedship with the sacred. These laws, once something's in physical form, it's history. It's history. Once something has happened, to use it as a reference point means you're dealing with history, which is why with forgiveness, you're choosing to hold on to history and to not forgiving. I mean, you're holding on to your history and insisting it become your present moment. Mm-hmm. And it's like keeping the dead alive, and the amount of your life force that you have to pour into those corpses to keep them dancing in the moonlight is so strong. And I think what people think that forgiveness is like telling people, it's okay what you did, da, da, da. It's not. Forgiveness is saying, I get that that this event, for whatever reason, had to happen, and it woke up in me a level of fear or a level of contempt or a level of vengeance that I didn't know I had. Mm-hmm. And that's for me to deal with now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I didn't know that. And it could have been anybody could have woke that up. You did, and I have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Right. I also think that Yeah, it definitely Rolfs you of all of the stuff. Like I got Rolfed during the last 4 years of my own inner Donald Trump. And that was very valuable. A very valuable person in me to meet was the person who is positive she's right. Almost all, like the Buddhists say, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? I want to be right. And that will make me very happy, knowing I'm right. And if my opinions are not right, I would have different opinions, and that is just a circle of hell.
I feel like I'm talking to myself with you. Go ahead.
It helped me see this thing inside of me that it's like we were talking about earlier. I don't want that person in my plane anymore. I don't want the bombastic know-it-all person traveling with me. I mean, they can be with me, but I don't want to sit in the same row with them. I'm not going to kill them. I'm not going to get rid of them. I can't anyway, but I'm going to make them really, really comfortable towards the back of the plane. I'll get them a blankie and some of those snack boxes. The tapas box is really nice at United. And but to make the awareness is where the beginning of, for lack of a better word, the healing or the freedom begins. The awareness, I don't forgive this person. I wish them ill. Like my friend writes these, he calls them the anger psalms. And it's like, may all of your children do poorly in school, And,
oh my God.
And he's a priest.
A Jesuit, I bet.
He's a Jesuit.
Yeah.
May all of your children do poorly in school.
Yeah.
But so to just become aware of that and that it's you that it's making crazy doesn't hurt other people for us not to forgive them. They usually are not even aware of it, which is double infuriating. Mm-hmm. But if you, as C.S. Lewis says, want to become a person of forgiveness, it's to me, the hugest decision you could make in your life. This starts now. Mm-hmm. And then you start being robbed of the stuff you don't forgive, the people who you still blame. A friend of mine in a recovery movement for people with tiny control issues, unlike myself, she saw someone who had tattooed on her arm, "It's not them." Mm-hmm. And I just love that, because left to my own devices, which I'm not, but left to my own devices, I believe it is them. That's making me feel kind of crunchy and rashy and uptight. And it's something in me that is responding in a way that is either superior or this sort of victimized self-righteousness that I am capable of. But as soon as I'm aware of it, instead of shaming myself or getting back into that forward thrust and getting busy, I can go, wow, honey, that's so cool that has come forth for you. And what Neil does at Shapes of Truth is he has people bring physically their superego out on the table so he can talk to them. Mm-hmm. And he'll say to them, well, who hired you? Well, we think our parents did it to them because it's them or the teachers or the whatever. We hired that person. We think we're safer and we're going to get farther with somebody keeping us scared and moving forward and ever upward. And to become aware of it, so that what we do, what Neil and I have done with the superego on the table, say, I'm glad you're here. I will never get rid of you, but I'm wondering if you might want to be the ethical consultant for the operation, and you would go wait in the library, and you wouldn't be here with me at my desk or at the dining table. But if I needed an ethical consultant, we would go get you. And until then, you could just read, It's about not cutting off parts of you that are less attractive, let's say, or adorable than others. There's a great acronym in recovery. It's not an acronym, but people look at the word intimacy as meaning into me I see, and that I'm not hiding from the parts of me that are just so loving and compassionate and full of wonder and curiosity. I'm hiding and pretending not to see the parts of me that are scared or small or cringy or miserly. Oh my God, those hard parts in my heart. But if I move into the awareness, then the heart can automatically start softening. And if I say it out loud to you, then you're going to tell me your hardness of heart stories. We're going to start laughing about it. And we're going to, knowing the two of us, we're going to start duking it out as to who has had the harder heart. Then we're going to be laughing, and laughter is carbonated holiness. So we're already taking it from a dark secret spider and rat corner to, a chapel. And then, Trevor Noah said last week something I love so much. He said, when you laugh with someone, you're really sharing something. And so instead of being in that shame and isolation of a little kid pretending not to feel all these emotions we weren't allowed to have, you and I are riffing and jamming, and we're laughing, and we're really sharing something. And then it becomes bread for others, because one of us will write about it. It becomes medicine.
Always. And I really love your emphasis on love. I and the power of love, and all that you say about love again and again in all your books, but as you talk about love with forgiveness and this wonderful soul cocktail of what makes
I'm back.
the human being thrive.
Right.
And what I, for the longest time, have found to be the most extraordinary paradox is that the soul thrives on love. It thrives on truth. It thrives on honesty. It thrives on all the good things we are: integrity, intuitive hits. It thrives on keeping us healthy. And again, we shut that down and we go the other direction. And we need a therapist to help us open up to love. But we never need a therapist to help us open up to be angry. Nobody ever goes to a therapist and says, I want to be a more angry person. I want to develop my anger. I want to develop my temper. This is like the effortless effort. But we have to go to a therapist to open up, to do what feels the best.
Yeah.
I find that so paradoxical, Annie. I can't even, I think, what the hell's wrong with you? I mean, what is wrong with you? Why do you need help to do what comes the most naturally, that feels the best? And that is what comes the quickest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't think we got owner's manuals for that as children. I didn't. My parents were not happy together in their marriage, and they should have raised teacup poodles instead of children. The message I got was to just do better and to just stay busy. What you were talking about earlier, like if you're sitting and spacing out and staring off into space like a cat, a grown-up always came along, whether it was a parent or a teacher, and they said, don't you have something to do? Do you have homework? Is your room clean? And so first of all, we learned to stay on guard, and we learned to appear to be being busy. And then we learned to appear to be all sorts of certain ways. We appeared not to be angry. My mom's from England and Liverpool. And I was raised that if you were angry or sad, you didn't eat. If you were angry or sad at the dinner table, you went to your room without eating. So therefore, I grew.
You to go to your room without eating?
Pardon me?
Were you sent to your room?
Yeah, you were sent to your room without eating.
Oh.
If you were angry or sad. And it was uncomfortable for them. I'll tell you, you sat there in shame because you had wrecked dinner for everyone, plus you were hungry. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you what my friend, the same Jesuit who writes the angry Psalms, may all your children do poorly in school. He talks a lot about shame because it's such a central part of the sad package, the package of us that is most longing to be seen and loved and accepted and tended to with love. But he says the 5 rules for all adult Americans is that you must not have anything wrong with you or different about you. Have I told you this before? No. You must not have anything wrong with you or different about you. If you do, you really need to get over it as quickly as possible. You need to correct it. If you can't get over it or correct it, you should just pretend that you have, that it's no longer actually an issue. You're fine. And the 4th rule is that if you can't even fake it, you should just not show up, because it's very painful for the rest of us to have to be with you. And the 5th rule is if you're going to insist on the right to show up, you should have the decency to be ashamed. And this is what you should have the decency to be ashamed if you're going to insist on showing up. That's what the shame monster tells you. That's how people got us to work harder. That's how people got us to keep our weight down when we were able to. That's how people got you to, like for women, be like I was like a little flight attendant in my family, you know, because I had so much shame. I looked different. I was way too smart. I was good at math. I had this crazy hair, the whole thing. And the way that I live by those rules, and every writing student I've ever had, I tell them those rules because I said, what you're up against is the shame. Your voice doesn't sound to you as good as Isabel Allende's or as Mary Oliver's. What you have to write about isn't as dramatic or as insightful or profound. Your nothing is as good as almost anyone's, you know, and you show up and you insist on not being ashamed. You know, back before I turned on Woody Allen, he said 80% of life is just showing up. And so you show up and you refuse to be shamed. You break all 5 rules. If you want to get anywhere, you're going to have this most wonderful and fearfully made about you is going to be what's different about you or what's a little off. You know, and then as you start to get older, you start to find people like, remember the Karras that Vonnegut talked about, where it was your groups? Karras starts to involve odder and odder people, you know, people who are having trippier and more mystical or more out there thoughts. And little by little, you put together your precious community. And for me, that the precious community is where the shame was first tended to. And that was where I began to become a person of forgiveness. So for me, the shame and the forgiveness are part of, there's on the same quarter mile on the path that you must walk through. And that what you started this all by saying is the awareness that it's there. Like you said, you withdraw your story from you withdraw your soul from that story and thank the person for eliciting these old feelings that you're going to go now deal with. It's the same thing with the shame and the forgiveness. When you have the shame or you don't forgive, somebody has helped that become visible. It's like Neil bringing the superego out on the table so he can talk directly to it. It's like, you know what? I'm going to deal with this now. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Absolutely. And, you know, in a funny way, you've given a description of the capacity to live spontaneously versus dragging the weight of your history with you. And another way to describe that is the difference between forever living your fate versus opening to your destiny. Which is, in destiny is a spontaneous force. It bubbles up. It requires the energy, the grace of the soul. Destiny is present time. It's vertical, and fate is horizontal. One is chronos, one is kairos, and when what forgiveness really is a release from all the like grade school lessons, as hard as they are, it's like a graduation day. It's like a graduation day that says, oh, I get it. I get that life on this planet will never be around me. It will never be my definition of fair. It will never be that bad things happen, but that badness is universal. It's not, and now it was my turn to experience it. And however it is, we recognize that none of us is immune to the shadow side of the human experience. None of us. And we'd like to think we are. And that's the problem, is when we start thinking we are embracing something that is not true. None of us is. And when we finally get to a truth that says all life breathes together, whatever happens to one can happen to me. Therefore, how I treat one, I treat the whole. And you start living from that higher altitude. And I honestly believe that one act of forgiveness, a true act of forgiveness, is somehow an act of grace so powerful that it impacts the whole in ways we will never understand, because we don't get how the light of the soul works. We don't. And we don't see how we're all interconnected. This is where faith comes in. This is where we have to operate on faith and trust. And I think when we experience things like synchronicity, or I was just thinking about you, I was just holding you in my heart, and look at that, here you are.
Mm-hmm.
Those are experiences of how that soul internet works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wasn't there a page from the book you were going to read? You mentioned before we started.
I read that first page, and then I love this one. I love several, but this is on forgiveness, because I just love this. Each full act of forgiveness, and even each partial act, is not only a miracle, but a prize of redemption, as with books of S&H green stamps. But instead of a toaster, you get a unit of peace. Each act of forgiveness gives us more awareness of the beauty that surrounds us and of the friendly light inside, the tiny and usually ignored part that hasn't been faked, cheapened, or exploited. It is an infinitesimally small point of light, like when our ancient TVs were turning off an eternity, the world in a blade of grass. It's stunning. It's stunning how you describe it.
Thank you.
It's absolutely stunning.
Thank you. Well, I think that you and I just mostly write about love and forgiveness, love and forgiveness, love and forgiveness, in all of the different ways that we have experienced it and gotten stuck and gotten free, and then wanted to carry the word that if you want to get free, can you give me a 1/4 inch of forgiveness? Can you give me just a 1/4 inch?
Yeah.
That's the deal. If you can give me a 1/4 inch of softening your heart towards this person or towards this government or towards whatever, I can promise you a miracle. Buckle up. But then the person goes, well, let me get back to you on that. I can give you freedom and peace of mind if you can just give me a angstrom unit of a softened approach. So, well, let me get back to you on that. There's this guy, I know I've told you this, who helped Bill Wilson get AA started in 1935. And this is so you, but he told Bill Wilson, he said, sometimes I think that heaven is just a new pair of glasses. And so without coaching and birth coaches and speakers and poems, we often have our bad glasses on, where we're seeing how, we're just full of judgment, and this is good and this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this person's annoying, I wonder if I can correct their behavior, whatever. And or racing around trying to get one more thing done, which is just the death of all spontaneity in life. One more thing done. And you put the good glasses on and you become like a woofily little kid walking along looking at each leaf, which is very annoying when you're the parent or the auntie, that they want to look at each leaf. But that's how we can be too, and be blown away that the daffodils right outside my window, there were not daffodils there a week ago, and to see a daffodil, if I'm paying attention, is to see God, God and his distressing guys, or her distressing guys with a yellow clown frills on and a big nose. But if I am paying attention, then I'm seeing the divine in a daffodil. That's the most common of all flowers in California.
There was a time when the statement, you see God in the small details, Teresa's wonderful teaching, it wouldn't have meant anything to me, Annie. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have meant anything to me. Mm-hmm. I would think, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Just like the first time I went to, actually one of the few times I ever went to a lecture, and it was from a guru master. And I thought, what is everybody doing here listening to him? I was in my 20s. And I watched how everybody just was filled with such reverence when this man walked in. And I thought, what the heck is this about? And then someone asked him, about what's the greatest way to get to God, he said, become a fully healthy, holy you. And I thought, oh, for God's sake.
Oh,
And
stop.
really get me out of here. I came all this, but you know what?
Yeah.
Now I find that I'm spending the rest of my life teaching that. How did that happen? And that's what you're teaching. And we could sound so vague and empty, but after all the journeys we've been on, all the experiences, at the end of the day, now that we're in the last third of our lives, what I have to say to people, what you have to say is actually, everybody, it's love, forgiveness, treat each other with the greatest kindness. And that will be more valuable to you than anything else you can do.
I think we might want to mention God.
Oh, and then there's, yes, well, yeah.
Whatever. But okay, can I tell I know we're almost out of time, but can I tell one story that I don't think, maybe it's in the new book, I can't remember, and it doesn't go with any question you asked, but I love it. It helps me. And I wear this story around my neck of a woman who, in my recovery group, from alcoholism, who had an awful oral cancer. She'd had part of her jaw removed, part of her tongue. So she had a speech impediment. She was fine. She was completely fine. They took care of it. And Chalice shared. Chalice just was very hopeful and more grateful than almost anyone else you were going to see that day. And years later, she announced during the meeting that it had come back. And she was going to need to go back to the surgeon, and she was going to probably need some more radiation. And everybody started that fluttering around of, well, my beautician's nephew had that same kind of cancer and they're just fine now. And, I know that people are doing oxygen therapy now and kale, and you can get over right. And she just waved it all away. And she said, you know what? God's got it. And so my elderly sisters in recovery gave me this for my 60th birthday. It says, God's got it. And all day, every day, I'll start to agitate because I was raised to figure it out. I didn't know figure it out was a bad slogan. I'll start to figure out, okay, wait. All right, hold on. Okay, wait. And then I go, God's got it. And as soon as I get my sticky fingers off of the controls and I do the sacrament of ploppage and I sit down and I breathe for a minute, then I think God goes, wow, thank you. Good, I'm on it. Thanks for stopping by.
I kind of go to bed with that when I'll say at night, here's my list. Take care of it while I sleep. I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I do. Yeah. These are the people that need healing. These are the people who have asked for prayers.
Yeah.
That's what I need. This is this. And I have the angels who heal, the healing angels take me out of my body and work on me during the night. And you get the night shift. I get the day shift.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's how I pray.
Someone told me that there are unemployed angels fluttering around us all the time, and they're just wishing they would get a job. And that if you could say, oh, hi, is anyone available right now? It's like the happiest part of their day. You think that's true?
It's a wonderful thought. I wish we had more time. I want to thank you, and everybody get this book. It is beautiful. Dusk Night Dawn. Annie, thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Big love to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.